They don't respect the one who stays, not the one who forgives endlessly, not the one who keeps explaining, clarifying, or justifying, not the one who gives chance after chance, hoping one day someone will finally wake up and recognize their worth. No, respect doesn't go to that person. Respect goes to the one who leaves, the one who doesn't argue, the one who doesn't beg, the one who doesn't post dramatic monologues or send essays in the middle of the night, the one who simply disappears. And here's the twist. It's not about walking away in rage or bitterness. Anyone can storm off angry, but when you walk away in silence, calm, deliberate, certain, everything changes. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." And nothing shakes people's sense of power like realizing you don't need them anymore. See, the reason they treat you like an option is because you've taught them that no matter what they do, you'll stay. You've trained them to believe you're always available, always forgiving, always willing to carry more than your share of the weight. And they've learned something dangerous from that. They've learned they can withdraw, they can provoke, they can disrespect. They can even replace you, yet you'll still be standing there, waiting. Every time you stayed, you confirmed their suspicion. No matter what I do, you won't leave. Let's make this clear. They're not confused. They're not bad communicators. They're not too immature to know what they're doing. No, this is intentional. They're training you. Every time you over-explain, every time you chase, every time you plead for closure, they're running an experiment. And when you comply, they record the result. I can hurt you, and you'll still stay. Respect dies. Control grows. But something happens the moment you break that pattern. The moment you stop playing the game. The moment you go silent instead of engaging. The moment you don't show up to the fight they're trying to start. The moment you don't answer the baited text or chase after the cold shoulder. That's when the fear begins. Not fear of you, but fear of your distance. Because suddenly, you've done the one thing they didn't expect. You left. Not with threats, not with drama, not with announcements. Just gone. And that absence, that silence, echoes louder than any explanation or argument ever could. Machiavelli captured this truth when he wrote, "A prince is also esteemed when he is a true friend and a true enemy." In other words, be unmistakable in your presence and unmistakable in your absence. Nobody fears someone who clings. Nobody respects someone who begs. But silence, distance, boundaries enforced without words, that gets respect. Let's play out a scenario. Imagine someone mocks you, lies to you, uses you, and then disappears. You respond with a long paragraph, explaining how much they hurt you, how you deserved better, how you only wanted honesty. Do you know what they reply? LOL, you good? Or, why are you being dramatic? And just like that, you gave them more power. They weren't looking for love. They were looking for proof. Proof that you're still emotionally available. Now flip the script. They disrespect you. They cross a line. And you don't explain. You don't chase. You don't retaliate. You vanish. Suddenly they're unsettled. They start texting, "Are we good? You're really not going to talk to me? Wow, didn't think you'd actually leave." The power dynamic shifts, not because you won an argument, but because you refuse to compete. That's the Machiavellian move. Don't escalate, just exit. Let them yell into silence. Let them scroll through your absence. Because silence is not nothing. Silence is strategy. And here's the cruel but liberating truth. People often don't respect you until they lose access to you. You don't need revenge. You don't need to teach them a lesson. You don't even need to punish them. Your absence does that all by itself. They won't hear your words. They'll hear the void you left. They'll replay the last message you never answered. They'll stalk your posts, searching for signs of anger or forgiveness. But there will be none, because you didn't walk away from them. You walked back toward yourself. And that's what burns the most. See? They never believed you'd leave. They believed you'd bend, you'd break, you'd beg. But you wouldn't walk, because you were always the one who cared more, reached out first, and smoothed things over. But when you walk away without giving them a villain to blame, without giving them the closure they demand, without giving them the fight they crave, something eerie happens. You become a mirror, and in that mirror, they don't see your weakness. They see their own, their manipulation, their dependence, their insecurity. That's what haunts them. Not your words, not your pain, but your lack of reaction. Machiavelli said, "It is necessary for a prince to learn how not to be good." It sounds harsh, but here's the truth. Being endlessly forgiving, endlessly available, endlessly soft in the face of repeated disrespect, that isn't virtue. That's self-destruction. There's nothing noble about staying where your value is constantly in question. There's nothing strong about loving someone who only respects your silence. If you're still there, hoping that someday they'll change, let me be blunt. You're not loyal. You're just afraid to walk. Walking away doesn't mean cutting people off with drama. It doesn't mean posting cryptic quotes to make them wonder. It doesn't mean pretending you don't care while secretly watching their stories. Walking away is quieter than that. It's an internal shift. It's the moment you stop explaining, stop making excuses for their behavior, stop telling yourself they'll change when, and finally admit they won't change because they never had to. You were doing all the emotional work. You were carrying the connection. You were paying the price alone. Walking away means you stop funding the dysfunction, and that's the first act of power. Here's what happens when you truly walk away. At first, it's quiet. Too quiet. They might toss out a breadcrumb, liking one of your posts, sending a casual "hey" text, or giving you a random compliment out of nowhere. It seems harmless, but it's not. It's bait. They're testing the waters. They're checking, are you still available? Because now you've become scarce. And what's scarce suddenly feels sacred. But here's where you'll feel the temptation. You'll want to reply, to show them what they lost, to explain, to get that final bit of recognition. Don't. Because the second you engage, you confirm one thing. They still have access. And nobody respects what they can access at will. They respect what they had to earn and failed to keep. Think about it. The people who truly valued you, they would have changed while you were still there. They would have apologized without being pushed. They would have respected you the first time. But the ones who only wake up after you've gone, they're not missing you. They're missing the version of themselves that felt powerful while you were available. Machiavelli would have called your silence a political maneuver, not emotional, not petty, strategic. Because once you stop reacting, you shift from being the one seeking validation to being the one setting the frame. You're no longer auditioning for a place in their life. You're governing your own. And your first decree, the act that makes everything different, is walking away without waiting to be chased. That's when you become the mystery, the absence, the unanswered question they can't solve. And what do people do with mysteries? They obsess. They tell themselves stories. He must have someone else. She's just being immature. They're trying to get attention. But deep down, they know the truth. You're gone. And you're gone because they failed to keep you. That's what burns. not your silence itself, but the reason behind it. Here's the shift you'll notice next. People will start mirroring your distance. They'll pretend they don't care either. They'll act unfazed. They'll even mimic your energy. Short replies, cold posture, silence. But it's fake. Because when someone truly doesn't care, they move on. When someone pretends not to care, they keep watching. They stalk every post, dissect every silence, analyze every sign of your peace. Because deep down, they're hoping for a relapse. They're waiting for the old version of you to return, the one who broke their own boundaries just to keep the connection alive. But that version of you is gone. Machiavelli said, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." Now ask yourself, who did you let stay? Who did you keep explaining yourself to? Who did you tolerate? That's not on them. That's on you. But not anymore. Walking away isn't just about them. It's about what you're no longer willing to tolerate from yourself. No more proving. No more fixing. No more bleeding for people who sharpen the knife. You've upgraded. From emotionally available to emotionally untouchable. And here's the most surprising part. You're not bitter. You're not angry. You're not walking around with a wall around your heart. You're clear. And clarity looks like distance. To the emotionally immature, clarity feels like rejection. But it's not. It's control. Because the second you walk away, you stop waiting to be chosen. You stop hoping to be seen. You stop pouring water into deserts, begging them to bloom. You reclaim control of your own energy, and suddenly, you're not chasing love anymore. You're attracting respect. Not through noise, not through begging, but through silence. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them rewrite the story however they need to. It doesn't matter, because you've already left that chapter. You're not the villain. You're not the hero. You're the lesson. And here's the brutal truth. They will learn it, one way or another. Maybe not with you. Maybe not today. But they'll meet someone else, someone colder, someone who walks away even sooner. And when that happens, they'll remember. They'll realize you were the warning shot they ignored. This is the law of power. When you walk away, they only have two choices: rise to meet you, or watch you vanish into a level they can't reach. Either way, you win. Let's dig deeper into what walking away really means. It's not about blocking someone dramatically or announcing your exit with fireworks. That's performance, not power. It's not about posting cryptic quotes on social media so they'll get the message. That's still chasing attention. And it's not about pretending you don't care while secretly watching their every move. That's not walking away. That's acting. True walking away is an internal shift. It's the moment you stop explaining yourself. You stop making excuses for their behavior. You stop telling yourself they'll change when, and instead accept they won't change because they never had to. You realize you've been the one carrying the connection. You've been doing all the emotional labor. You've been paying the price while they enjoyed the benefits. And when you finally put that burden down, something happens. They begin to crumble. At first, it's quiet. A like on your post. A "Hey stranger" text. A sudden compliment out of nowhere. They'll disguise it as casual, but it isn't. They're fishing. They're testing because you've become scarce. And human nature is wired to value scarcity. What's rare feels sacred, but only once it's gone. Now here's where the trap lies. You'll feel tempted to respond, to finally show them what they lost, to prove how strong you are, to explain why you left. But don't, because the moment you re-engage, You confirm the one thing they're desperate to know. They still have emotional access. And if they still have access, they don't have to respect you. People don't respect what's always available. They respect what they had to earn and failed to keep. The ones who truly loved you would have shifted while you were still present. They would have corrected themselves before you left. But the ones who only respect you after you walk away, they never valued your presence. They only fear your absence. That's not love. That's panic. And panic is not connection. It's control slipping through their hands. Machiavelli would call this silence a political maneuver. Cold, strategic, not emotional. Not. Because once you stop reacting, you're no longer trying to prove your worth. You flip the script. Now they're the ones scrambling, trying to decode your moves. And here's the beauty. You don't have to do anything. Your absence does the work for you. Because when you refuse to be read, when you refuse to explain, when you refuse to perform for their validation, you transform. You're no longer predictable. You're no longer controllable. You're no longer the safe bet who will always come back. You've become unreadable. And in power dynamics, the unreadable one always has the edge. Now let's be brutally honest. They never thought you'd leave. They thought you'd bend. They thought you'd break. They thought you'd explain and over-explain, forgive and over-forgive. They built their entire behavior on one assumption. You won't walk. So when you finally do quietly, calmly, without handing them a villain to blame, something haunting happens. You become a mirror. And in that mirror, they don't see you. They see themselves. They see their manipulation. They see their arrogance. They see their weakness. That's what lingers. Not your words, not your anger, not your pain, but their reflection. And that's why silence is more devastating than any speech. Because you didn't give them a fight. You didn't give them closure. You didn't give them a role to play. You just left. And the human mind hates unfinished stories. They'll replay the last interaction, searching for clues. They'll stalk your posts, looking for hidden messages. They'll invent narratives to make sense of your absence. But here's the harsh truth. The story ended the moment you stopped writing it. Machiavelli warned, "It is necessary for a prince to learn how not to be good." And what he meant was this: goodness without limits is self-destruction. Loyalty without boundaries is slavery. Forgiveness without consequence is suicide. You don't need to punish them. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to make them feel small. All you need is to stop playing the game. And that, ironically, is what makes them feel smaller than any insult ever could. Because the moment you stop feeding the cycle, the moment you break the rhythm, the moment you walk without turning back, that's the day the old you dies. And in its place, someone they can't control, someone they can't predict, someone they'll never have access to again. Here's the next stage. After you've walked away, after you've gone silent, after you've stopped feeding the dysfunction, something strange happens. They start to copy you. They'll mirror your distance. Pretend they don't care. Pretend they've moved on. They'll shrug and say, whatever. They'll act unbothered, maybe even smug. But it's all theater, because when people truly don't care, they don't watch. And these people, they're watching everything, every post, every silence, every shift in your energy. Why? Because they're hoping for a relapse. They're hoping the old version of you will come back, the one who always reached out first, who always apologized first, who always carried the relationship on their back. But that version of you died the day you walked away. Machiavelli said, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." Now it's your turn to look around. Who did you surround yourself with? Who did you keep explaining yourself to? Who did you tolerate even as they chipped away at your self-respect? The answer is uncomfortable. But the good news is this: not anymore. Walking away is no longer about punishing them. It's about refusing to punish yourself. Because here's the truth. Every time you over-explained, every time you chased, every time you begged for clarity, you weren't just teaching them how to treat you. You were teaching yourself how to tolerate less than you deserve. And when you finally break that cycle, you step into something new. You stop being emotionally available to everyone, and you become emotionally untouchable. And let's be clear, you don't get there by becoming bitter. You don't get there by walling off your heart. You don't get there by posting about how you're done with people. You get there by becoming clear. Clarity looks like distance. To immature people, that distance feels like rejection, but it isn't. It's self-governance. Because the second you walk away, you stop waiting to be chosen. You stop waiting to be validated. You stop waiting for scraps of respect from people who should have given it to you freely. Instead, you start giving it to yourself. And here's the paradox. Once you no longer need their validation, that's when respect shows up. Not because you demanded it, but because you stopped begging for it. Let them talk. Let them twist the story. Let them tell others you were cold, distant, or crazy. It doesn't matter, because while they're busy rewriting the past, you're already living in the next chapter. And here's the cruel irony. They'll realize too late that they never feared losing you. They only feared losing control of you. And when control is gone, panic sets in. That's why they'll send breadcrumbs. That's why they'll try to casually reappear. That's why they'll test your boundaries in small ways, hoping you'll slip. But here's the Machiavellian rule. If you re-engage, even once, you've handed them the proof they were looking for. You're still emotionally available. And people never respect what they can access at will. The ones who truly cared would have shifted when you were still around. But the ones who only panic when you leave, they don't respect your presence. They only fear your absence. That's not love. That's control panic. And Machiavelli would call your silence not weakness, but strategy. A political maneuver. A way of reclaiming power without ever throwing a punch. Because once you walk away without needing to be chased, you flip the script. You're no longer the one begging for an answer. You're the one who left the question hanging. And nothing drives people mad like an unanswered question. They'll invent stories. He must have someone else. She's doing this for attention. They're just being dramatic. But deep down, they know the truth. You're gone. And not because you wanted to hurt them, but because staying would have meant betraying yourself. And that, more than anything else, is what burns. Not the silence, not the absence, not even the loss. What burns them is knowing that when you left, you didn't just walk away from them, you walked back to yourself. That's why Machiavelli insisted that most people only learn through loss. They don't listen to explanations. They don't respond to empathy. They don't change because of conversations. They change because of absence. Because impact hurts more than insight. So don't give them words. Don't give them warnings. Don't give them closure. Give them silence. And let that silence echo until they can't escape the sound of what they lost. Let's bring this to the final truth. Walking away is not the end of a relationship. It's the beginning of your sovereignty. Because when you stop chasing, you stop waiting to be chosen. You stop pouring yourself into empty wells, hoping they'll turn into rivers. You stop bleeding for people who sharpen the knife, and something changes. You step out of the role of the desperate one, the one explaining, justifying, proving, and into the role of the untouchable one, the mystery, the ghost they can't decode. They'll tell themselves stories. He's cold. She's selfish. They're doing this to get attention. But deep down, they know the truth. You're gone. And you're gone because they failed to keep you. That's what burns. Not your anger. not your bitterness, but the realization that staying would have meant betraying yourself. And here's what comes next. People will pretend not to care. They'll mirror your silence. They'll act detached. But if it were real, they'd be gone already. Pretending not to care is just another way of admitting they do. They'll keep watching. They'll keep checking. They'll keep waiting for the old version of you to return. The one who bent, broke, and begged just to keep the connection alive. But that version of you is gone, and in its place is someone new. Someone Machiavelli would have admired. Someone who doesn't argue for respect, but commands it. Someone who doesn't explain their boundaries, but enforces them with silence. Someone who doesn't demand loyalty, but withdraws access the second it's violated. Machiavelli wrote, "A prince must learn how not to be good." And what he meant was this: goodness without strength is a leash others will use to drag you. Loyalty without limits is slavery. Kindness without boundaries is self-destruction. Walking away is how you cut that leash. Because when you disappear, when you withhold explanation, when you refuse to give closure, you're not being cruel. You're showing clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about what you deserve. Clarity about who gets access to you and who never will again. And let's be clear, the right people wouldn't need you to walk away to respect you. They would have respected you the first time. They would have changed while you were still there. They would have apologized without being forced. But the wrong ones, they only respect the echo of your silence. They only respect the emptiness of your absence. And if that's the only way they see your worth, then they never deserve to stand beside you. So here's the lesson. You never had to scream to be heard. You never had to prove loyalty to be loved. You never had to drain yourself just to be noticed. The ones who were meant for you would have valued you long before you walked. And those who didn't? They don't deserve the healed version of you. The peaceful one. The silent one. The sovereign one. Because you're not heartless. You're not cold. You're clear. And clarity to the emotionally immature feels like rejection. But it's not. It's power. Because the moment you walk away, you stop waiting to be chosen. You stop hoping to be seen. You stop watering deserts and start building gardens of your own. And here's the final truth. You're not chasing love anymore. You're attracting respect. Not through drama. Not through shouting. Not through endless explanation. But through silence. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let them rewrite the story however they need to. It doesn't matter. Because you're already on the next page. You're not the villain. You're not the hero. You're the lesson. And those who refuse to learn it, they'll meet someone else who walks even faster, even quieter, even sooner. This is the law of power. When you walk away, they either rise to meet you, or they watch you vanish into a level they'll never reach. Either way, you've already won.